Dave Collins wiped grease from his hands with an old rag as his work phone buzzed against the concrete floor of the subway tunnel. The emergency lighting flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the walls while he crouched next to a junction box that had been giving the city transit system headaches for 3 days straight. His knees creaked as he stood up, reminding him that 42 years of crawling through tight spaces and lifting heavy equipment had taken their toll on his body. The caller ID showed his dispatcher's number, which meant another emergency job somewhere in the city. Dave had been hoping to finish this subway repair and maybe grab dinner with his kids tonight, but emergency calls always came at the worst times. That was the life of a maintenance electrician in New York City. "Collins here," he answered, balancing the phone between his shoulder and ear while packing his tools back into their worn leather case. "Dave, I need you downtown right away." His dispatcher, Jerry's voice, crackled through the speaker. "Big job at the Meridian Spire. Electrical problems that have been driving everyone crazy for weeks." Dave paused. The Meridian Spire was that fancy? New building near the financial district. The one that made headlines 3 years ago when the first alien diplomat moved in. Most people called it the Alien Tower, though the official name sounded much more professional. Dave had never worked on anything that high profile before. "What kind of problems are we talking about?" Dave asked, closing his tool case and heading toward the tunnel exit. "And why me? They must have their own maintenance crew for a building like that. Power surges, complete electrical failures, systems going haywire for no reason," Jerry explained. "Their regular crew already tried fixing it. So did Peterson Electric and those expensive consultants from overseas. Nothing works. The building, management is desperate, and they're willing to pay overtime rates for whoever can figure it out." Dave climbed the metal stairs leading up from the subway tunnel, his boots echoing in the narrow space. Overtime rates meant he could finally fix the leaky roof at home and maybe take the kids somewhere nice for their spring break. Emma had been asking about that science museum trip for months. "All right, I'll take it," Dave said. "Send me the address and contact information." "Already in your email." "One more thing, Dave. The tenant is that alien Empress everyone talks about on the news. Try not to stare or ask for autographs or anything weird like that." Dave laughed as he reached street level, breathing in the familiar smell of hot dogs and car exhaust. That meant he was back in the real world. "Jerry, I've got 2 teenagers at home. Trust me, dealing with difficult personalities is part of my daily routine." An hour later, Dave stood in the marble lobby of the Meridian Spire, feeling completely out of place in his work clothes and steel-toed boots. The building rose 60 floors above the city, all glass and chrome and modern architecture that probably cost more than Dave would earn in several lifetimes. Security guards in expensive suits checked his identification 3 times before letting him near the elevator that would take him to the penthouse levels. The elevator ride took forever, climbing past floors filled with lawyers and investment firms and other businesses that dealt in numbers, rather than fixing actual problems. Dave watched the city shrink below him through the glass walls, wondering what kind of electrical issue could stump so many professional teams. In his experience, most problems came down to loose connections, overloaded circuits, or equipment that nobody bothered to maintain properly. The elevator finally stopped at floor 58, opening into a private hallway that looked more like a hotel than an apartment building. Thick carpets covered the floor and expensive artwork hung on the walls. Dave had seen pictures of alien art on the news, but seeing it in person was different. The colors seemed to shift when he looked at them from different angles, and the shapes reminded him of mathematical equations he had never learned. A human woman in a business suit met him at the elevator. She looked tired and stressed, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she had been dealing with these electrical problems for far too long. "Mr. Collins? I'm Patricia Wells, the building manager. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I have to warn you, our tenant can be quite demanding. She's not used to dealing with maintenance workers directly." Dave nodded, following Patricia down the hallway toward a set of double doors that probably led to the penthouse apartment. "I understand. Has she mentioned any specific problems with the electrical systems, or is this all based on building monitoring?" "The power surges happen several times a day," Patricia explained, lowering her voice as they approached the doors. "Lights flicker, computers crash, the elevator gets stuck between floors. We've had to replace half the electronic equipment in the building over the past month. The insurance company is threatening to drop our coverage if we don't fix whatever is causing this." Patricia pressed a button next to the doors, which chimed softly before opening to reveal an apartment that looked like it belonged in a museum. The ceiling stretched up 2 full stories, with windows that offered a view of the entire city. Furniture that definitely came from another world filled the space, all flowing curves and materials that seemed to glow with their own light. Standing near the windows, with her back turned toward the door, was the most famous alien on Earth. Empress Lyria of the Asthan Commonwealth looked exactly like her pictures in the news, tall and elegant with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sunlight. Her hair moved like water, flowing past her shoulders in shades of silver that caught the light. She wore robes that probably cost more than Dave's truck. "Your Majesty," Patricia said formally, "this is Dave Collins, the electrician we discussed." The Empress turned around slowly and Dave got his first look at her face. The news cameras always focused on her otherworldly beauty and royal bearing, but standing in the same room with her, Dave noticed other details. Her eyes looked tired, and she held herself carefully, like someone trying not to show that they were in pain. "Another human technician," the Empress said, her voice carrying a slight accent that made every word sound musical. "I assume you will be as ineffective as the others who have wasted my time over the past weeks." Dave set down his tool case and looked around the apartment, already noticing things that the previous electricians might have missed. Several of the light fixtures showed signs of power fluctuations, and he could hear a faint humming sound coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. "Well, Your Majesty, I can't promise anything until I take a look at your electrical systems," Dave said, keeping his voice respectful but not intimidated. "But I've been doing this work for 15 years, and most problems have logical explanations, once you know where to look." The Empress studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Very well. Patricia will show you to the utility areas. I trust you will work quickly and quietly. I have important communications with my homeworld that cannot be interrupted by your repairs." As Patricia led him toward a service corridor, Dave caught a glimpse of the Empress reaching out to steady herself against a chair. The movement was subtle, but it reminded him of his own mother during her last years when her arthritis made every step painful, but she was too proud to admit she needed help. Something about this job was going to be more complicated than faulty wiring, Dave realized. But that was okay. Complicated problems were usually the most interesting ones to solve. Dave spent the first 2 hours mapping out the electrical system in the Empress's penthouse, and what he found made no sense at all. Every wire was properly connected, every circuit breaker functioned correctly, and all the equipment was top of the line, stuff that should have worked perfectly for decades. Yet his voltage meter showed power fluctuations happening throughout the apartment, surges that appeared and disappeared without any logical pattern. The utility room behind the kitchen contained enough electrical monitoring equipment to run a small hospital. Dave studied the readouts from the past week, looking for clues that the previous technicians might have missed. The power surges definitely happened several times each day, but they were not random like everyone assumed. There was a rhythm to them, an irregular but repeating pattern that reminded him of something he could not quite remember. "Finding anything useful?" Patricia asked, appearing in the doorway with a cup of coffee that smelled better than anything Dave usually drank. "Maybe," Dave said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "These power surges follow a specific pattern. See how they happen in clusters, then stop for a while, then start up again? That's not typical electrical failure behavior." Patricia looked over his shoulder at the monitoring charts. "What do you think is causing it?" "I'm not sure yet," Dave admitted. "But whatever it is, the surges are strongest near the Empress's private quarters. Has she mentioned any problems with her personal electronics?" "She doesn't really talk to us about personal matters," Patricia said carefully. "The Empress is very private. She handles most of her own affairs and only contacts building management when absolutely necessary." Dave nodded, making notes in his work log. Privacy was understandable, especially for someone in her position, but it made troubleshooting more difficult when he could not get complete information about when and where the problems occurred. After Patricia left, Dave continued his investigation, working his way through the apartment's complex wiring system. The penthouse had been specially modified to accommodate alien technology, with power outlets and connections that looked nothing like standard Earth equipment. Most of the modifications seemed to work fine, but Dave noticed that some of the alien devices drew power in unusual ways. Around noon, the Empress emerged from her private study to check on his progress. She moved carefully, Dave observed, keeping one hand trailing along the wall as if she needed the extra support. When she thought he was not looking, she paused to grip the back of a chair, her knuckles showing pale against her blue skin. "How much longer will this disruption continue?" she asked, her tone suggesting that Dave's presence was an unwelcome intrusion. "Hard to say, Your Majesty," Dave replied, not looking up from the outlet he was testing. "I need to understand what's causing these power surges before I can fix them. Have you noticed if they happen more often at certain times of day or when you're using specific equipment?" The Empress was quiet for so long that Dave finally looked up to see if she was still there. She stood perfectly still, staring out the window at the city below, but her reflection in the glass showed an expression of pain that she kept hidden from her face. "The surges are simply a malfunction of your primitive electrical systems," she said finally. "I have more important matters to attend to than discussing technical details with maintenance staff." She walked away, but Dave noticed the slight tremor in her left hand and the way she had to concentrate on each step. Something was wrong, and it was not just attitude problems. Dave spent the afternoon running diagnostics on every major electrical component in the apartment. The alien equipment fascinated him from a technical standpoint. Power converters that operated on principles he did not understand, control systems that responded to touch in ways that seemed almost alive. But none of it showed signs of malfunction. The breakthrough came around 4 in the afternoon, when Dave was testing the electrical systems in the Empress's bedroom. He had expected her to object to him working in her private space, but she had retreated to her study and left him alone. The bedroom was surprisingly simple compared to the public areas of the apartment, with a bed that looked almost human and personal items that suggested the Empress was not as alien as her public image implied. Dave was checking the power outlets near her bed when his meter detected another surge. This one was stronger than the others, and it seemed to originate not from the building's electrical system but from somewhere else entirely. Dave followed the readings, moving his equipment around the room until he located the source. The surges were coming from the Empress herself. Dave sat back on his heels, staring at his instruments and trying to make sense of what he was seeing. According to his readings, the Empress was generating some kind of bioelectric field that interfered with the building's electrical systems. That explained why the surges were strongest near her quarters, and why they followed an irregular but repeating pattern. But the pattern itself was what made Dave's blood run cold with recognition. He had seen those exact rhythms before, 3 years ago when his daughter Emma was in the hospital with heart problems. The irregular clustering, the way the episode started and stopped, the overall frequency, it was identical to the cardiac arrhythmia patterns that had nearly killed his 8-year-old daughter. Dave pulled out his phone and scrolled through his old photos until he found the heart monitor readings that the doctors had shown him during Emma's treatment. The similarity was unmistakable. Whatever was causing the Empress to generate these bioelectric surges, it was following the same pattern as a serious heart condition. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. The Empress was not being difficult or dismissive because she was arrogant, she was sick, possibly seriously ill, and she was trying to hide it from everyone around her. The tremors, the way she moved carefully, the exhaustion he had noticed in her eyes, they were all symptoms of someone whose body was failing them. Dave packed up his equipment and walked back to the main living area, his mind racing. How could he approach the situation? He was just an electrician, not a doctor, and the Empress had made it clear that she did not appreciate personal questions. But if she was having the alien equivalent of heart problems, she needed medical attention, not electrical repairs. He found the Empress in her study, seated at a desk that curved around her like a crescent moon. She was reviewing documents on a screen that floated in midair, her fingers moving through holographic displays with practiced efficiency. But Dave noticed that she was leaning heavily on the desk, and her breathing seemed more labored than it should be. "Your Majesty," Dave said carefully, "I think I've figured out what's causing your electrical problems." The Empress did not look up from her work. "Excellent. How quickly can you repair it?" "Well, that's the thing," Dave said, setting his tool case down and choosing his words carefully. "The problem is not with your building's electrical system. It's something else entirely." Now the Empress did look up, her eyes sharp and alert despite her obvious fatigue. "Explain." Dave took a deep breath. This was either going to help her or get him thrown out of the building, but he had to try. His daughter's life had once depended on someone being brave enough to recognize the symptoms that everyone else missed. "The power surges are being caused by some kind of bioelectric field that you're generating," Dave said. "And the pattern of these surges matches something I've seen before, in humans with serious heart problems." The Empress went completely still, her face showing no expression at all. But Dave saw her hands clench into fists, and he knew he had guessed correctly. "I think you're sick, Your Majesty. And I think you've been hiding it from everyone, including your own doctors." The silence in the study stretched on for what felt like hours, though Dave knew it was probably only seconds. The Empress stared at him with an expression that could have frozen water, her alien features arranged in a mask of imperial displeasure that probably sent diplomats running for cover. But Dave had faced down angry teenagers, worried teachers, and frustrated doctors during Emma's medical crisis. He knew the difference between real anger and fear disguised as fury. "You forget yourself. Maintenance worker," the Empress said, her voice cold enough to cut glass. "Your job is to repair electrical systems, not to make absurd medical diagnoses based on your limited human understanding." Dave nodded, keeping his voice calm and respectful. "You're absolutely right, Your Majesty. I'm not a doctor, and I don't understand alien biology. But I do understand electrical patterns, and I know what I saw when my daughter was in the hospital 3 years ago." He pulled out his phone and showed her the old photos of Emma's heart monitor readings. "These are the patterns that almost killed my 8-year-old daughter. Irregular rhythms, clustering episodes, the same frequency intervals that your bioelectric field is producing. The doctors called it ventricular arrhythmia." The Empress glanced at the phone screen, and Dave saw something flicker across her face before the royal mask returned. It was just for a moment, but he recognized the look, the same expression Emma used to get when she was scared but trying to be brave. "Human cardiac problems have nothing to do with Aston physiology," the Empress said, but her voice lacked the commanding tone from before. "Our bioelectric organs function on completely different principles." "Maybe they do," Dave agreed, putting his phone away. "But sick is sick regardless of species. And you're moving like someone who's in pain, resting more than you think anyone notices, and generating electrical interference that matches the pattern of a failing heart." The Empress stood up abruptly, swaying slightly before catching herself on the desk. "This conversation is over. Complete your repairs and leave." But as she turned to walk away, her legs gave out. Dave moved without thinking, catching her before she hit the floor. For a moment, the most powerful alien diplomat on Earth was just a scared, sick person leaning on a maintenance worker for support. "When was the last time you saw a doctor?" Dave asked gently, helping her to a chair. The Empress was quiet for a long time, her head resting in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 4 months ago, before the trade negotiations began, I sent my personal physician home to maintain appearances." Dave knelt beside her chair, the way he used to when Emma was having one of her episodes. "What did your doctor say?" "That my bioelectric organs were beginning to fail," the Empress admitted, not meeting his eyes. "A degenerative condition that affects older members of my species. Progressive weakness, irregular bioelectric pulses, eventual cardiac arrest." He estimated I had perhaps a year before. She trailed off, but Dave understood. He had heard similar conversations in hospital hallways, the careful language doctors used when the prognosis was not good. "Why did you send your doctor away?" Dave asked. "If you knew you were sick, why handle it alone?" The Empress finally looked at him, and for the first time, Dave saw past the royal facade to the person underneath. She looked tired and afraid, and very, very alone. "Because I am the sole representative of my people on this planet," she said. "The trade agreements between our species depend on Earth's perception that the Asthan Commonwealth is strong and stable. If word spread that their Empress was dying, it would undermine years of diplomatic progress." Dave sat back on his heels, thinking about all the times Emma had tried to hide her symptoms because she did not want to worry him and her mother. The same stubborn pride, the same fear of appearing weak, even when weakness was just another word for being human, or in this case, being Asthan. "You know what I learned when Emma was sick?" Dave said. "Pride doesn't cure anything, it just makes everything worse. The doctors told us that if we had waited even one more day to bring her to the hospital, we would have lost her." The Empress was quiet, but Dave could see her listening. "Emma used to hide her chest pains because she didn't want to be different from other kids," Dave continued. "She would pretend she was fine during soccer practice, even when her heart was skipping beats. You know what changed her mind?" "What?" the Empress asked, despite herself. "I told her that her team needed her healthy more than they needed her to look strong. That being brave sometimes means asking for help, not refusing it." Dave stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. "Your people need you alive more than they need you to appear invincible, and Earth needs these trade agreements to work. If you die because you were too proud to get medical treatment, both our species lose." The Empress was silent for several minutes, and Dave let her think. He had learned with his own kids that sometimes the most important conversations happened in the spaces between words. "Human medical knowledge is primitive compared to Asthan science," she said finally. "Your doctors would not understand my condition." "Maybe not," Dave agreed. "But they understand hearts and electrical systems and what happens when either one starts to fail. And more importantly, they understand that sick people need help, regardless of what species they belong to." The Empress looked up at him with something that might have been hope. "You believe human doctors could help me?" "I believe doctors are doctors," Dave said. "The good ones care more about saving lives than they do about politics or species barriers. And I know some very good cardiologists from when Emma was in treatment." He pulled out his phone again and scrolled through his contacts. "Dr. Martinez at Presbyterian Hospital saved my daughter's life. If I called him and explained the situation, he would at least be willing to consult with your physician about treatment options." "My physician is on my homeworld," the Empress said. "The communication delay alone would make collaboration nearly impossible." "Then bring him here," Dave suggested. "Or better yet, have him work with a team of human doctors. Pool the medical knowledge of both species and figure out how to fix your bioelectric organs." The Empress stared at him as if he had suggested something impossible. "You make it sound so simple." "Because it is simple," Dave said. "You call your doctor, I call mine, and we get everyone working together to keep you alive. The complicated part is admitting that you need help, and you've already done that." For the first time since Dave had met her, the Empress smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it transformed her entire face. "If I agree to this," she said carefully, "I would need absolute discretion. The trade negotiations are at a critical stage, and any sign of weakness could jeopardize everything." "Doctor-patient confidentiality," Dave said. "And electrician customer confidentiality, if that's a thing. Nobody hears about this from me." The Empress nodded slowly, then reached for a communication device that looked like a cross between a cell phone and a piece of jewelry. "I will contact my physician. If you could speak with your Dr. Martinez." "Already dialing," Dave said, his phone pressed to his ear. "Emma's going to love this story when she's older. Her dad helped save an alien Empress." As the phone began to ring, Dave caught the Empress's reflection in the window again. This time, instead of pain and fear, he saw something that looked like relief, maybe even hope. It was going to be an interesting conversation with Dr. Martinez. Dr. Martinez answered on the third ring, his familiar voice bringing back memories of long nights in hospital waiting rooms and medical conversations that Dave had tried hard to forget. The cardiologist sounded surprised to hear from him after 3 years, but when Dave explained the situation, Martinez's tone shifted immediately into the focused professionalism that had saved Emma's life. An alien patient with bioelectric organs, Martinez repeated, as if testing how the words sounded. Dave, I have to be honest with you, this is completely outside my area of expertise. But heart failure is heart failure, right? Dave asked, watching the Empress speak in rapid musical phrases to someone on her own communication device. Whether it's pumping blood or generating electricity, if the organ isn't working properly, the patient needs help. Martinez was quiet, for a moment, and Dave could practically hear him thinking through the medical implications. You said the electrical patterns match what we saw with Emma's arrhythmia? Exactly the same, Dave confirmed. Irregular clustering, similar frequencies, the same kind of progressive deterioration. If I hadn't seen Emma's monitor readings, I never would have recognized it. All right, Martinez said finally. I'll need to consult with some colleagues, but I'm willing to try. Can the patient's physician provide detailed scans and biological data? Dave looked over at the Empress, who was still deep in conversation with what he assumed was her doctor on the homeworld. I think we can arrange that. How quickly can we set something up? Give me an hour to make some calls, Martinez replied. I know a few specialists who might be interested in this kind of unprecedented collaboration. And Dave, make sure your patient understands that we're going into completely uncharted territory here. After ending the call, Dave found himself in the strange position of waiting alongside an alien Empress for what might be the most important medical consultation in human history. The Empress had finished her conversation and was sitting very still in her chair, her hands folded in her lap like a patient in a doctor's waiting room. My physician, Dr. Kellen, is skeptical but willing to participate, she said without looking up. He believes that human medicine is too primitive to offer meaningful assistance, but he acknowledges that conventional asthma treatments have been ineffective. Dave sat down across from her, thinking about how to approach the conversation. Emma had been scared before her surgery, and he had learned that sometimes the best thing to do was just talk about normal things while waiting for medical news. How long have you been Earth's only diplomatic representative? Dave asked. The Empress looked surprised by the question. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, why do you ask? That's a long time to be away from home, especially when you're not feeling well, Dave said. Do you have family back on your homeworld? For a moment, the Empress's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. I have 2 younger brothers and a sister. They believe I am here because I am the strongest and most capable member of our royal family. If they knew the truth. She trailed off, but Dave understood. He thought about his own kids and how they saw him as someone who could fix any problem, handle any crisis. The pressure of always having to be the strong one was something he recognized. When Emma was in the hospital, she was more worried about me and her mother than she was about herself, Dave said. She kept apologizing for making us worry, like it was her fault that she got sick. It took us a while to convince her that being sick wasn't a failure or a weakness. The Empress looked at him with curiosity. How did you convince her? We told her that everyone needs help sometimes, even parents. That asking for help is actually a sign of strength because it means you care enough about other people to keep yourself healthy for them. Before the Empress could respond, Dave's phone rang. Dr. Martinez's name appeared on the screen, and Dave felt his stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. Dave, I've got good news and challenging news, Martinez said without preamble. The good news is that I've assembled a team of cardiologists, bioengineers, and electromagnetic specialists who are very interested in this case. The challenging news is that we're going to need the patient here for direct examination. Dave looked at the Empress, who had clearly overheard the conversation. Her face went pale, and she shook her head slightly. That might be difficult, Dave said carefully. The patient has some concerns about privacy and maintaining certain appearances during ongoing negotiations. I understand the sensitivity, Martinez replied, but we can't treat a condition we can't properly examine. We would need detailed bioelectric readings, tissue samples, maybe even surgical intervention depending on what we find. The Empress stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her posture rigid with what Dave recognized as fear masquerading as anger. Dr. Martinez, let me call you back in a few minutes, Dave said, ending the call. He walked over to stand beside the Empress, both of them looking out at the city below. From 58 floors up, the people on the streets looked tiny and insignificant, going about their daily lives without any idea that history might be made in the building above them. "You're scared," Dave said quietly. "I am not scared," the Empress replied automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's okay to be scared," Dave said. "I was terrified when the doctors told us they needed to operate on Emma's heart. 8 years old, and they were talking about cracking open her chest and stopping her heart to fix the electrical problems. I wanted to grab her and run away from the hospital." The Empress turned to look at him. "But you didn't run." "No, because running wouldn't have fixed anything. Emma needed surgery, so we stayed and let the doctors help her." Dave paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes being brave means doing the thing that scares you most, especially when other people are counting on you. "If I leave this building, if I'm seen going to a human hospital, it will raise questions that I cannot answer," the Empress said. "The trade negotiations will fail completely if you die during the middle of them," Dave finished. "Look, I don't understand interstellar politics, but I do understand that dead people can't sign treaties." The Empress was quiet for a long time, staring down at the city. Dave waited, remembering all the times he had sat with Emma while she worked through her fears about doctors and treatments and the possibility that things might not work out. "Your daughter," the Empress said finally. "The surgery was successful?" "She runs track now," Dave said with a smile. "Faster than kids who never had heart problems. The doctor said her artificial pacemaker actually gives her better rhythm control than most people have naturally." The Empress nodded slowly as if making a decision. "If I agree to this examination, would it be possible to maintain some discretion? Perhaps the doctors could come here instead of me going to them." Dave's phone was already in his hand. "Let me ask." This time Martinez answered immediately. "Dave, I was hoping you would call back quickly. I've been thinking about the logistics, and I believe we can set up a mobile examination unit. Bring the equipment to the patient instead of the other way around." "How quickly could you arrange that?" Dave asked, watching hope flicker across the Empress's face. "Tomorrow morning," Martinez said. "But I need you to understand something, Dave. If this patient's condition is as serious as you've described, we might be looking at emergency surgery. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Dave looked at the Empress, who had heard every word. She met his gaze and nodded once, a small but decisive gesture. "We'll be ready," Dave said. After ending the call, the Empress walked back to her desk and activated her communication device again. When the connection established, she spoke in her own language, but Dave could hear the change in her tone. Where before she had sounded formal and diplomatic, now she sounded like someone asking for help. "I have contacted my government," she said after finishing the call. "I have explained that I require emergency medical consultation and that Earth's doctors may be able to provide assistance that our own physicians cannot. The official story is that this represents an important opportunity for medical cooperation between our species." "And the real story?" Dave asked. The Empress smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "The real story is that I am tired of trying to carry the weight of 2 worlds on my shoulders while my heart is failing. Tomorrow, I choose to trust human medicine and hope that your Dr. Martinez is as skilled as you believe him to be." Burr felt a familiar mixture of pride and terror that he remembered from Emma's treatment. Tomorrow everything would change one way or another. Dave arrived at the Meridian Spire before dawn, carrying coffee and bagels that he hoped might help calm his nerves. He had barely slept, spending most of the night thinking about Emma's surgery and wondering if he was doing the right thing by pushing the Empress toward human medical treatment. The lobby was empty except for security guards who waved him through without the usual lengthy check-in process. The elevator ride to the 58th floor felt different this morning. Instead of going up to fix electrical problems, Dave was ascending toward what might be the most important medical collaboration in human history. His phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Martinez confirming that the mobile medical unit would arrive at 8 in the morning, equipped with portable scanning equipment and a direct communication link to Presbyterian Hospital. Dave found the Empress already awake, standing in her study wearing simpler clothing than he had seen before. She looked smaller somehow, more human, as if removing the elaborate royal robes had also stripped away some of the barriers between them. "I have been in communication with Dr. Kellen throughout the night," she said, without turning around. "He has transmitted detailed biological data about Asthan physiology to your medical team. He remains skeptical about human capabilities, but he is curious about your diagnostic methods." "How are you feeling?" Dave asked, setting down his coffee and bagels on a side table. The Empress turned around and Dave saw that she looked exhausted but somehow more peaceful than before. "Frightened," she admitted, "but also relieved. I had forgotten what it felt like to share a burden with someone else." They spent the next hour in comfortable conversation, with Dave telling stories about Emma's recovery and the Empress sharing memories of her homeworld. Dave learned that she had been a bioengineering student before inheriting her diplomatic position, which explained her technical understanding of her own condition. She had been monitoring her bioelectric output for months, watching the patterns deteriorate while feeling powerless to stop them. At exactly 8 o'clock, the elevator opened to reveal Dr. Martinez and 3 other specialists wheeling equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Dave made introductions, watching as the most famous alien on Earth shook hands with a group of human doctors who were trying very hard to act like this was just another medical consultation. Dr. Martinez took charge immediately, his calm professionalism filling the apartment with the same focused energy Dave remembered from Emma's treatment. "Your Majesty, we're going to start with some basic scans to understand your bioelectric system. Dr. Chen here specializes in electromagnetic physiology, and Dr. Williams is our best cardiac surgeon." The examination took 3 hours with the human doctors working alongside Dr. Kellen through a quantum communication link that allowed real-time collaboration across interstellar distances. Dave watched from a corner of the room, feeling simultaneously useful and completely out of his depth. He was just an electrician who had recognized a pattern, but these doctors were exploring entirely new frontiers of medicine. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen said, studying readouts that meant nothing to Dave but clearly excited the medical team. "The bioelectric organs function like a biological pacemaker, but they're integrated with the patient's entire nervous system. It's like having a backup power supply for the brain and heart combined." Dr. Kellen's voice came through the communication link, his tone more respectful than it had been earlier. "The human scanning technology provides resolution that our equipment cannot match. I can see details of the organ deterioration that were not visible in our previous examinations." The Empress lay very still during the scans, her eyes closed, but her breathing steady. Dave found himself holding his breath during the more intensive procedures, remembering how small and vulnerable Emma had looked surrounded by medical equipment. After reviewing the scan results for nearly an hour, Dr. Martinez called the team together for consultation. Dave stayed in his corner, but the Empress gestured for him to join them. "The damage to your bioelectric organs is extensive," Dr. Martinez said gently, "but it's not irreversible. The problem is similar to what we see in humans with advanced heart failure. The electrical conduction system is breaking down, causing irregular rhythms and reduced efficiency." Dr. Kellen's voice joined the discussion from across the galaxy. "Asthan medical practice has no effective treatment for this condition. We can slow the progression, but we cannot repair the damage. But we might be able to," Dr. Williams said, pulling up a 3-dimensional image of the Empress's bioelectric system. "If we combine human cardiac surgery techniques with Asthan biotechnology, we could potentially implant a hybrid device that would restore normal electrical function." The room went quiet as everyone absorbed the implications. Dave looked at the Empress, who was staring at the medical display with an expression of cautious hope. "What kind of device?" she asked. Dr. Chen leaned forward, clearly excited about the technical possibilities. "A biological pacemaker enhanced with human electronics. We would use tissue from your own bioelectric organs, grown in a lab, and then integrated with Earth technology, to create a replacement system that your body would accept. The surgery would require unprecedented cooperation between our medical teams," Dr. Kellen added. "I would need to travel to Earth to assist with the procedure, as no human surgeon has experience with Asthan anatomy." Dave watched the Empress process this information, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination that Emma had shown before her surgery. The stakes were higher here, not just one person's life, but the future relationship between two entire species. But the core decision was the same: trust the doctors, or accept the inevitable failure of a failing heart. How long would the surgery take? The Empress asked. Approximately 8 hours, Dr. Martinez replied. We would need to stop your bioelectric organs temporarily while installing the hybrid device, which means life support systems that we've never used on an Asthen patient before. The Empress looked at Dave, and he saw a question in her eyes that he recognized. Emma had looked at him the same way before signing the consent forms for her surgery. What do you think? The Empress asked. Dave thought about all the times he had fixed electrical systems that seemed hopeless, finding solutions by combining different technologies and approaches. I think these doctors know what they're doing, he said. And I think your people need you healthy more than they need you to avoid taking risks. The Empress nodded slowly, then turned back to the medical team. When can we schedule this procedure? The next week passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Dr. Kellen arrived from the Asthen homeworld, bringing biological samples and medical equipment that had never been seen on Earth. The hospital cleared an entire surgical floor for security and privacy, while Dave found himself serving as an unofficial liaison between the medical teams and the Empress. The surgery itself took 11 hours instead of 8, but Dave waited through every minute of it, just as he had during Emma's operation. Patricia from building management brought him coffee and sandwiches, and Dr. Martinez sent regular updates through the surgical suite doors. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the operating room, his scrubs were soaked with sweat, but his expression was triumphant. The hybrid device is functioning perfectly, he announced. Her bioelectric patterns are stronger and more regular than they've been in months. Dave felt the same flood of relief and gratitude that had overwhelmed him when Emma's surgery was successful. The Empress would live, the trade negotiations could continue, and two species had learned that cooperation was possible even in the most challenging circumstances. 2 days later, Dave returned to the Meridian Spire to check on the building's electrical systems. The power surges had completely disappeared, and the monitoring equipment showed steady, normal readings throughout the apartment. More importantly, the Empress was sitting up in her bed, looking healthier and more energetic than he had ever seen her. The hybrid device works better than anyone expected, she said, showing him a small scar on her chest where the bioelectric organs had been repaired. Dr. Kellen says it may actually improve my natural abilities rather than just restoring them. Dave smiled, remembering Emma's excitement when she discovered that her pacemaker made her heart more efficient than before. Her surgery. Sometimes fixing something makes it better than it was originally. The Empress stood up and walked to the window, moving with the steady confidence that had been missing during Dave's previous visits. The trade negotiations concluded successfully. Yesterday, she said. Both governments are calling this medical collaboration a breakthrough in interspecies cooperation. And what do you call it? Dave asked. The Empress turned around and Dave saw something in her expression that he had never seen before. Genuine happiness mixed with deep gratitude. I call it proof that asking for help was the bravest thing I have ever done, she said. And I call you the most important electrician in 2 galaxies, because you were the only person who recognized that some problems cannot be solved with royal authority or advanced technology. Sometimes they just need someone who cares enough to pay attention. Dave packed up his tools for the last time in the Meridian Spire, knowing that the building's electrical problems were permanently solved. But more importantly, he knew that Emma would be proud of him when he told her the story of how her heart condition had helped save an alien Empress. Outside the building, Dave looked up at the 60 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the sky and smiled. Sometimes the best fixes were the ones that helped other people discover they didn't have to carry their burdens alone.